couple of days ago, investigative reporter Michael Isikoff had a scoop for Yahoo News in which he reported that the president was having a hard time finding a lawyer. Lots of big-name lawyers, lots and lots of big-name law firms were all saying no. When the White House approached them, or even when the president himself personally called them to ask if he would represent the president, if they would represent the president on the Russia issue. Now, the president may have not been able to get big-name lawyers or big-name law firms to represent him, but it's not like he's going without. He did ultimately sign up a lawyer to represent him on the Russia issue, but what he got was one of his old lawyers from New York who has represented him in his real estate business and his casino business. His New York lawyer who has now come to D.C. to try to represent Donald Trump in this very different matter. And that defense started out today with a swing and a miss, with a total basic screw-up.
Although Mr. Comey testified that he only leaked the memos in response to a tweet, the public record reveals that the New York Times was quoting from those memos the day before the referenced tweet, which belies Mr. Comey's excuse for this unauthorized disclosure of privileged information and appears to be entirely retaliatory.
The debut of Donald Trump's new/old lawyer today, zinging the New York Times and getting it totally wrong in the process. Like he, flipped it, or did the math wrong, or basically, sort of did the reading wrong. This is an embarrassing error. He tried to hit the Times here, tried to hit James Comey, absolutely 100% missed. I mean, this is the way it actually happened. This is a story the New York Times published on May 11th. It was 2 days after Comey was fired. It's a story about how the president had asked James Comey for loyalty during a dinner conversation they'd had. The day after that story came out, the president tweeted that there might be tapes of his conversations with James Comey. That was May 12th. Then it was 4 days after the president's tweet that the Times published this scoop, that the president asked James Comey to kibosh the Mike Flynn investigation, and he wrote a memo about it that night, memorializing that fact and making a contemporaneous record about it. That's the way this happened. That's the timeline. Today, we got an explanation from the fired FBI director as to how and why that timeline happened the way it did.
I asked, President tweeted on Friday after I got fired that I better hope there's not tapes. I woke up in the middle of the night on Monday night, because it didn't dawn on me originally, that there might be corroboration for our conversation. There might be a tape. And my judgment was I needed to get that out into the public square. And so I asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter. Didn't do it myself for a variety of reasons, but I asked him to because I thought that might prompt the appointment of a special counsel. And so I asked a close friend of mine to do it.
So that's very straightforward. Here's how it went down. First, May 9th, Trump fires Comey. 2 days later, May 11th, Times publishes that story about the president asking for Comey's loyalty. And they source friends who Comey told about that dinner and the loyalty request at the time. The next day, Friday, May 12th, the president tweets that Comey better hope there are no tapes. And then the following Monday, after that weekend, Comey says he wakes up in the middle of the night, makes a decision to ask his friend to share the contents of his memo about the Mike Flynn thing with a reporter. The day after that, Tuesday, May 16th, his friend shares the contents of that memo, and the New York Times publishes their story based on that memo. The headline was very clear. Comey memo says Trump asked him to end Flynn investigation. And that's the timeline. That's what happened. Trump's lawyer completely blew that today.
Although Mr. Comey testified that he only leaked the memos in response to a tweet, the public record reveals that the New York Times was quoting from those memos the day before the referenced tweet.
Nope. Exactly wrong. Not at all. 100% failure. I mean, obviously, a lot of the importance of James Comey's testimony today and the importance of him as a figure in this scandal is about what he says happened versus what the president says happened, and you have to decide who to believe. But this from the president's brand new lawyer? That there's a New York Times story proving James Comey lied about when he shared the memo with the press and why? That is categorically not true. It's a big swing and a big obvious miss. And that does not bode well for a president who may end up needing serious legal help sometime very soon. Joining us now is a key person who was never named in the Senate hearing today. He's the reporter who broke the story about the Comey memo last month. He is also the reporter who wrote the story about reported evidence of communication between Russia and the Trump campaign during the campaign. His name is Michael Schmidt, New York Times reporter. Mr. Schmidt, you have had a whale of a day. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thanks for having me. I appreciated that rundown. It was helped. It's been a busy month, so thank you.
Yeah, you've been doing a lot of work on that sort of last point first on that timeline. Did I basically get that timeline correct? It seems to me that the president's lawyer just sort of blew it, just got that backwards today. Is that the way you understand it as well?
I've tried to make this point over the past few weeks, and this really illustrates it. The tweet is what causes what happened today. Comey sees that tweet and says, wow, there may be a way to back this up. I really need to get this out there. And that is the reason why we knew that Trump asked him to end the Flynn investigation, and that's why we had the hearing today. It's just another example of the president's tweets undermining him.
When James Comey explained today his thinking about that and his decision to ask his friend, this Columbia law professor, to share with you the contents of that memo that he wrote memorializing the president's request about Flynn, it seemed like he was going out of his way to be clear that you were never given the memo itself. Is that true? Is that what he was indicating?
We don't have the copies of the memos. We're not sitting around with them on our desk, and we pointed that out in our stories that portions of the memos were read to us, but that we've never actually had them ourselves.
And when you received those memos, can you talk a little bit about how you verified that they were what they appeared to be?
Well, there's different things about whether the times line up, you know, about when the things were happening. Was Comey indeed at the White House on the 14th? That was something that we ran down pretty quickly. He was there. There was a meeting. There are basic things like that that you can use to corroborate your facts, and we do. But then you also, you know, you have to trust your sources, and you have to know who you're talking to. And, you know, I think we felt comfortable with the information that we had.
Michael, let me ask you about this other issue today with a story that you broke on February 14th. It's one of the biggest scoops of this entire scandal thus far. It's about members of the Trump campaign having repeated contacts with Russians for a year before the election. Director Comey today said that that article was almost entirely wrong. He repeated that assessment a few different times. Do you know what he's objecting to, and do you believe there is anything wrong with the reporting in that piece?
No, and we've posted a full story on our website by myself and my two colleagues who did the original story that lays out why we are standing by this story. Comey did not explain today why he thinks the story is inaccurate. We point out in the story that since it ran, we've learned about contacts between Carter Page and Russians, between Jared Kushner and Russians, and about different things that have been collected by the intelligence community. The one thought that we think the disagreement may be here on, which we point out in the story, is on the use of intelligence officials. The FBI has a very narrow definition of that. Folks in the intelligence community at Broad have a looser definition of that, especially with Russia, where the intelligence apparatus is deeply ingrained in this society. But we've never been given an explanation by the FBI. We went back to the FBI today and said, please clarify for us, tell us where we were wrong, and they did not provide us that information. You know, we have a story on our, you know, we wrote a full story about this, and we laid out the information that we have, and we stand where we are.
And I mean, as we've noted, and a lot of people other people have as well, and you note in tonight's story, multiple news outlets after your initial report have corroborated various aspects of this, citing it to different sources and with slightly different details. But it's real strange that this is hanging out there, something they object to with nobody explaining the objection. Michael Schmidt, reporter for the New York Times, whose writing was very much a part of today's news and will continue to be. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we got much more ahead tonight. Stay with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.